Like by many of the mitzvot and stories in the book of Dvarim, there are also some differences between the reprise of the Ten Commandments of our Parsha VaEtchanan and the Ten Commandments of Parshat Yitro. Particularly of interest is the reason given for observing the Shabbat. In Parshat Yitro, the reason given is because in 6 days God made the heavens and the earth and the sea and all that is in them, and He rested on the seventh day. Therefore, God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it. Whereas our Parsha gives the reason as, "You shall remember that you were a servant in the land of Egypt, and God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day." Why is it that in Yitro the reason given for observing the Shabbat is the week of creation with God resting on the seventh day, while in VaEtchanan the reason for observing the Shabbat is because God took us out from Egypt? Rav Soloveitchik says that one should expect that there should be differences, albeit minor, between the two sets of Ten Commandments. The first set was given with fanfare by God. However, those tablets were broken when Moshe came down the mountain at the sin of the golden calf. Moshe then brought a second set of tablets when he came back down the mountain announcing Israel's forgiveness. Rav Soloveitchik says that the first set represented the ideal, as the tablets were fashioned by God. However, this world cannot sustain the ideal, and as a result, the first set of tablets were broken. The second set of tablets were physically fashioned by Moshe. Because of human input into the giving of the Ten Commandments for the second time around, it represented the best translation of the divine ideal into human terms. As such, we should expect that the second telling of the Ten Commandments that Moshe is presenting to the people in our Parsha would be more relevant to them. In a similar manner, I mentioned by Parshat Yitro that Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs posits that when the Torah calls God Elokim, it is referring to God and His role as the universal God, the God of everyone. Conversely, when the Torah calls Him Hashem, it means that God is in His special role as the God of Israel. Using Rabbi Sachs's idea, I showed how the Ten Commandments in Parshat Yitro had a universalistic aspect to it as well, as it was introduced by using God's name of Elokim. In our Parsha, however, Moshe says that he acted as intermediary between God and Israel, relaying God's commandments to the people. According to Rabbi Sachs's thesis, since the second set of the Ten Commandments was introduced using God's name Hashem rather than Elokim, that meant that the second set was meant to be more specific to Israel. Applying both Rav Soloveitchik's idea and Rabbi Sachs's thesis to Shabbat, that would mean that the Shabbat in Yitro should reflect its more universal aspect, while the Shabbat in our Parsha should be more Israel-centric. In Yitro, the paragraph about Shabbat starts with the word Zachor. This is understood to be referring to performing positive acts to remember and celebrate the Shabbat. This helps to create a framework that anyone, Jew or Gentile, can perform. Accordingly, it then makes sense to give a more universal reason for Shabbat, in particular, informing us of a notion of divine time and God's week, which consists of 7 days, 6 days to work, and the seventh day to rest. In our Parsha, the paragraph about Shabbat starts with the word Shamor. In the words of Chazal, this means to observe the negative precepts of the day. Asking someone to observe the negative precepts could only be relevant for Israel, who as a result of God taking us out from Egypt, established a covenant with Him. As God says by the other time that it says Shamor by Shabbat, or in that case it actually says V'shameru, by making Israel His, God set observing the Shabbat to be a special sign between us. The differences of the Ten Commandments are meant to reflect the multifaceted layers of the Shabbat, and only taken together can we have a full appreciation and application of its special nature. Shabbat Shalom.